So now we've pulled our project down under our new user deploy. We know we've now got that connection to the repository that we need, and we can pull code down when we need to. But now we need to build the project on the server so it has all the packages that we need. And these build steps are what we're going to be automating through Laravel Envoy. But before we reach that point, we want to build the project on the server first so we know that it's working. So for now, if we just list out the contents of this folder, we can see we have our .env example. So what we want to do is copy, so cp, we want to copy that .env.example file, and we want to copy it to .env. So that just makes a copy of the file with the name .env. So for now we have a basic config that will just get the website up and running for now. But like I said, we will be moving these into the actual environment. We won't be using .env files, and obviously we will need to change this configuration to match our live server. But we'll be doing that in a future video. So before we install our dependencies with Composer, we need to let the application know that we're going to be in production rather than a local or development environment. And to do this, we need to edit our .env file. I'm going to use nano, but you can use vim if you want. So I'm just going to do a nano and then .env. You see here our app env is set to local, but we want to change this to production. So we just change that key to production like so. And we also want to set debugging to false because we don't want any errors showing on the application while it's live. So we change debug to true to false. So if we come down to the database section of the config, and we just need to give the database name that we created in MySQL in the earlier video. Now obviously I called mine Laravel_admin, so I'm just going to change that up to admin. My user was Laravel, and my password was just password. And then we can just save this file with Control O and then enter and then Control X to exit. Whenever we make a change to config like that, it's good practice to clear the cache. So to do that, it's a PHP artisan and then config : cache. You see there now that clears the cache. Now you don't always need to do this, but it's just good practice to do it whenever you've made an environment variable change, so it can pick up on them new changes. So for the installation of Composer and npm, I'm just going to be following the documentation here, so I will copy and paste the commands in the description as well, but you can also go to the website and get the commands directly. So let's look at installation for Composer. So if we come over here to the download page, we can see the commands here to download Composer using PHP. If we just cd into our home directory, so we can just cd for short, let's just copy this first command and paste this in. Then all this is doing, it's running PHP, and we're copying the Composer installer and we're copying it to a file called composersetup.php. If we just do an ls in this folder now, if we just do an ls in this folder, we can see there we have composersetup.php. And then the next command is to confirm our Composer install is correct. So we just paste this in and see here, install is verified. That just means the file is as expected and it's not been tampered with. So we know we're safe to run the installation. So now the next command on the list is to run the Composer setup file. And this will install Composer only for the deploy user. But we don't want that, we want to install it globally. So let's ignore that command and do the installation with a slightly different command. So we're going to run sudo, because we need super user privileges to copy this to a global directory. And we're going to use PHP to run the Composer setup script we just downloaded. And then we're going to pass it in a flag of install -dir. So we're saying we want you to install this in, and we want it in USR user local /bin. So this is a folder where we put binary files that we want to execute globally. And then as a final option, we can pass in what we want to call this program. So we can do that with file name. And what do we want to call it? And we'll just call it Composer. And then we just hit enter. And there you go, you can see we've now installed Composer in our user local bin. And we called it Composer here on the end here. You see that because we give it a file name of Composer. So now anywhere on our system, we could just type Composer and we run the Composer application. Perfect. So if we now cd into our Laravel project, so it's cd var www html, and then the name of your website, in my case yourdomain.com, and hit enter. So now let's run Composer and install the dependencies we need for our live site. So it's composer install -- no -dev. Now sometimes on lower end machines, like this bottom DigitalOcean droplet, the Composer install will fail. And that's because the Composer script is trying to allocate a gig of RAM. And obviously this server doesn't have it. Now you might not always get this error, so I'm glad it's shown so I can show you how to fix it. And the reason for this is because it's trying to allocate that memory, we don't have any swap files set up. So when it hits that memory limit, it just crashes. So what we want to do is create a swap. Now I'll paste these commands in below so you can copy and paste them in. And we need to run these with elevated privileges, so you need sudo in front of them all. And then we just need to make the swap with the following two commands. And then if we just run Composer install again, and you'll see we'll get an error here. And this is because we don't have curl installed. So I missed this extension off when we were setting the server up, so I apologise for that. But we can just install it now, no harm done. So to do that, it's a sudo apt install, and we want to install php-curl. And yes, we want to install that package. So again, let's run our Composer install. And as we can see now, we've got the curl extension and we've got our swap space set up. Composer can start the installation of the packages. So for installing Node and npm, I'm going to be using something called MVM, which is Node Version Manager. So I'll pop a link in the description. If you come over to the GitHub, it'll have the installation instructions in there for you. So here's the commands we need to run. So we need to get the installer and run it. And then we need to move the configuration into an executable directory. Let's use this first command first and get the file. So I'm just going to cd again into my home directory, so I don't want to be copying this into the project folder. We'll just paste that in. Now we have it downloaded. We can export Node Version Manager to our path with this next command. And then finally the third command is to actually load it into our current bash session. So now if we just type nvm, we can see we have Node Version Manager installed. And these are all the options you've got for installing and managing Node and npm. It's much easier to work with than just working with them directly. So what we want to do is nvm install, and we want to install Node. You can see that's done the installation for us. So if we just type node-v, we can see we've got Node version 13. And if we do npm-v, we can see we've got version 6 of npm installed. Perfect, that's everything we need to build the project on our server. So if we just cd back into var www html and then the name of your website. So then we want to install our production packages. So it's npm install, and then we can pass it the only flag, and we only want to install production. Once that's installed, the final thing we need to do is run the front end build. And Laravel comes with a script ready for that. So it's npm run, and then again production, or prod for short, and then hit enter. Then that'll run the production build of our front end assets. So that's now completed our front end build, and there's all our front end assets ready to go on our live server. So if you head over to the website now, you'll get an error. So let's take a look. And you see here now, this is because the permissions aren't correct on the logs folder. There will be permission problems on other folders that Laravel also needs to use. So in the next video, we'll look at changing them permissions so this now fully works.